We gotta go to the bullpen. Welcome to the Highland Bullpen, the all-new podcast bringing America's pastime to Scotland's shores. It doesn't matter if you're a Hall of Famer heading for Cooperstown or you're fresh out of the minor leagues. This is the podcast for you. Now, I've got an unlikely hero this week. While there's been lots of incredible performances on the mound and with lots of great hitting, my hero is one of the unsung heroes of the game of baseball, a young man called Joe West. Alan, does that name ring a bell to you?
No, did he do something wild?
He did something wildly impressive and consistent. Now, I believe Dave Jr. has got the inside track on who Joe West is and why he may be my hero this week.
So he officiated in the White Sox game last night, and there was a little banner, so I'm afraid I can't claim to have your level of knowledge, Richard. But Mr. West tied the most number of games officiated during a non-postseason. I'm sure you'll have the numbers to hand, but I think it was up somewhere between around about 5,600 games. And you think that's pretty impressive over that kind of length of career. So I believe that he tied the record last night. I don't know if it's the same officials that are kept on for an entire series. So it may be in Chicago that he breaks the record tonight.
Yeah, I think by the time that we go live for our listeners, I think he'll probably have broken the record. And I commend you. That was a nice guest there, Dave Jr. 5,375 games was a mark that he tied, going equal with Bill Clem's previous record.
Well, I was just including his AAA matches as well, Richard. That's all.
Well, I know you're far more professional and detailed than I. Yorkshire Dave, I know you've always had a soft spot for the guys with one of the toughest jobs in baseball, the guys that have to make the calls, and often, some of the players have to field difficult ground balls. The umpires often have to field abuse and occasionally some disrespect as well. So well done to Joe West and to all the guys doing that very difficult job.
Indeed, totally agree. I think in the world of sports, you need a referee. They're not always everyone's favourite, but I think the umpires in baseball are pretty cool guys. The guy behind the plate, they do take it physically, don't they? They quite often get hit by foul-tipped balls, and they can take it and also dish it out.
Absolutely.
Respect.
An example of his longevity would be the fact that he umpired his first MLB game before I was 1 year old. So that's going all the way back to 1976. And he's going to retire at the end of this season, but 43 years is the record tenure. And obviously he's going to break that. But he was a National League umpire before he moved over to cover games in the American League as well in 2002.
Yeah, I think, Cal Ripken is rightly called the Iron Man of the game, isn't he? And what was his consecutive record? 26-32. Memory. But 5,000 games for an umpire. He's the Iron Man of umpiring.
Absolutely. And as you can imagine, there was plenty of history in those games as well. He was behind the plate when Nolan Ryan had his fifth career no-hitter back in 81, and when Willie McCovey hit his 500th home run in 78. And he also has a perfect game on his resume as well. To be fair, it was Felix Hernandez that pitched it, but it was Joe West behind the plate back in 2012. Alan, I know you're a great believer in tradition and things like that, and you as you're saying earlier on, you're not always a big fan of change. So having the same umpire for 40 odd years sounds like something that would be right up your proverbial street.
Yeah, I've got so many questions. Just, you'd love to sit down, have a steak and chips and a couple of beers with the guy, and He's ramped up the Holiday Inn or the Hilton Hotels loyalty points scheme, hasn't he? I mean, how many souvenir beer mugs has he got from different stadiums that he's officiated in? What age is he?
A young, 68 years young he is at the moment, Al.
So I can get that he's capable at 68 of still officiating games. But, I mean, that effectively means he was in his early mid-20s when he started officiating MLB games. And it's like you occasionally see a youngish referee in football, but sometimes when you go to like a junior game or an amateur game and there's a guy who's like 23 refereeing a game of a bunch of strapping 32-year-old junior centre backs, you think you've got to be pretty tough to be able to do that. And doing that at MLB level is quite phenomenal as well. So to tip my cap to Mr. West. Very, very impressed and delighted to see that. And it's like we think there's a stat being thrown up every week in baseball, and now we have one for the officials as well. So it's just brilliant.
I can see you're feeling another Excel spreadsheet coming on, Al.
I hope he's recorded every game. He doesn't need to, does he? Because there's people record every baseball stat. He's not going to be like me sitting in a pub one day sort of thinking, I wish I'd started recording all the football games I went to when I was 4.5 instead of waiting till I was 44.5 or something like that. So absolutely fantastic. Am I right in saying that it's a crew that do a series? So he would be the behind the plate umpire in one game, but then he'd be doing another important role of officiating in the other games of the series, yeah?
Well, no, that's absolutely right as well. And here's one, we love a bit of competition in the bullpen here. We've got Hamish on hand to referee. So I can't take part in it because I know, and I'm not quite that big a cheat. But what would you guess the salary for a top MLB umpire? So Joe West's the best. How much do the top guys in the umpiring world make? Alan, do you want to kick off with a first guesstimate?
So I'm going to be a pedant and say, is this per game or per season?
We'll go for per year, I think, Alan. I think that's generally how it's totted up.
There's so many games, I can't see them. The expense account has got to be decent, but you're living out of a suitcase, and the guy's dedicated his life to living out of a suitcase, so he deserves some reward for that. I can't imagine. They're well paid in terms of us, but I can't imagine he's getting more than $250,000 a year.
Okay. Dave Jr., would you like to, as the old Price is Right game show used to say here in the UK, higher or lower? What are you going for?
I would say that Alan's being very generous. Perhaps America treats their sporting officials a whole lot better than we do, but I would imagine it's well south of $250,000. I would be surprised if it's much more than $100,000, if I'm being honest. I might be doing him a disservice, but there's a whole lot of travel expenses in there. It's not the worst job in the world to have, let's be honest, Alan. We're not forcing them out on the road.
No.
I think there would be multiple amount of crews out there, so I don't think they would work every. I'd be surprised if they done more than 2 series a week. Maybe even just the 1 series. I could be wrong, but somewhere between $150,000. I'd be really surprised if it was above that, knowing the way that these industries work.
Okay, thanks for that, Dave Jr. Yorkshire Dave, you're from a part of the world where they know the value of their pounds and pence, and in this case, their dollars and cents. So what would you guess a top MLB umpire would be taking home annually?
Yeah, it would be a total guess, and you can always tell a good question when you realise you've absolutely no idea and never really thought about it. I mean, when you go back to the days of 60s and 70s and football referees, and they were paid like, I don't know, £100 a game, £50 a game, weren't they? It was always, and they weren't even professionals, weren't they? That was always a thing, make them professional. I would imagine that the MLB, is pretty well professional umpires and they're remunerated reasonably, but I was thinking 100 grand. So I'll go lower end of what they've said and say 100 grand. It might even be graded so that, the top home plate official, the senior guy gets 100 and the others might be less, but no idea really.
Okay. Well, I think I could probably sum that up to say that Yorkshire Dave has been struck out in no uncertain terms. Dave Jr. got a bit of bat on it, but it's been comfortably thrown out at first base. Alan just about sneaked a base hit. But if you'd been after a home run, you'd have to have realised that top Major League umpires like Mr. West collect a cool $400,000. The guys at the top of the tree, I think the starting salary is in the high 100s. And I guess given the amount of money floating about the game of baseball in terms of the contracts, etc., the amount of money it generates, I guess I would probably, in all honesty, go on a bit higher than you guys anyway. I'm not sure they're going for that. I might have been looking at $250,000 or thereabouts at my best guess. But it's so Mr. West has done his job and done it very well for a long time, but hopefully he's been able to stick a few pounds away, or dollars away in this case, for a rainy day as well. Alan, does that surprise you?
If it surprises me, I'd say I'm pleasantly surprised. I think when you look at the money going around in the game, these guys are fairly important. They're the guys that get a bit of criticism, however they do it. It's not like criticism a football referee would get, where a penalty decision is either right or wrong, depending on the team you support. I think it's generally... It seems to me to be easier to validate if they've made the right calls or not. And there is a Twitter page, is Umpire Scorecards, which validates each umpire's performance. It's a good salary. I mean, I sort of half look on it and think, yeah, the expense account is good. But having travelled a bit with my job, I think the guy has lived out of a suitcase for 43 years. So I'm pleased to hear that.
I think you'd have to be a certain type of character to be able to do that life for as long as that, I would have thought. Dave Jr., what do you reckon to that?
Yeah, I'm quite taken aback. I think I might start making sure that when I'm watching the umpires that I think I might suddenly decide they're having a bad game after heralding them for the last 12 months. No, do you know, it maybe doesn't surprise me when I think about it, how strong the unions are, the voting mechanisms that these organisations have in place. I think when I say I'm surprised, I'm really pleasantly surprised, because the amount of money that is clearly made in the MLB, that the players make, these guys are putting their families on hold as well. So I'm really quite pleased that they're earning that level of money. Maybe it's something that we could look at in this country, because I'm sure the figures for our own referees in the football world are not anywhere comparable.
No, absolutely. Although I can reveal from an impeccably placed source that when the likes of, for example, Willie Collum, Scottish referee, was officiating at European games and Champions League, etc., I believe that payment was a 4-figure sum, which isn't bad for 90 minutes, and a nice wee jolly to some of the choicer parts of Europe on occasion as well. But yeah, I think those sums are kind of fair, and I guess it's like anything else at the top of the tree. You're very likely to earn quite a lot more than those are just in the start of their career journey. Of course, one of the most important jobs umpires have is to call strikes, and the umpire, the privilege of calling strikes when Mr. Turnbull was doing his stuff this week, was obviously a busy man calling all those strikes. Alan, what did you make of Spencer Turnbull's no-hitter?
Fantastic. Great for the ball club as well, because it's a team that have been struggling. It's all well and good people saying, oh, there's more no-hitters this year than usual. There's been 5 or 6, but there's a lot of pitchers out there. You're now immortalised. The catcher as well is a story worth thinking about as well. Eric Haas, he had not long been called up. I think it'd been the AAA Toledo Mudhens, presumably he was at. So with injury, I think as opposed to COVID, Eric was called up. And imagine you're playing AAA, I was going to say in front of a few hundred people, but that's every crowd these days. But you're playing at that sort of level, and then within a matter of days, you've packed your bags. Again, you're back in a hotel in Detroit, and you've just caught a no-hitter. seen the emotion on everybody. Jamer Candelario, I think, caught the last ball. Fantastic. So it's exciting when you support and follow a team who are not going to win anything. That's the big win. I don't know if you guys have got any thoughts on the no hitter sort of concept. Dave Jr., you got some ideas?
Yeah, it's more a slight anecdote, and again, it really is quite interesting, the amount of no hitters this year. I know that the White Sox have never had more than 2 in the same season, so it'll be interesting to see if that's. You feel like every game just now. It's very common anyway. Getting towards that 4th or 5th inning, you can quite often hear a commentator saying, "Well, no hitter yet," no hitter so far. But last night for the White Sox, I thought it was quite interesting. So Lance Lynn, who's had a terrific start to the season, found himself in a position where you had one of the Cardinals was sitting on third base, and you think you're into the 5th inning, and Lynn's on a no-hitter, but you've got a guy who's, was it 90 feet from plate to plate, who's 90 feet away from opening the scoring when the pitcher himself is on a no-hitter, which is a little bit odd. In that particular situation, the batsman had been walked to first base, then stole second, and went to third on a sac fly. And you did think, what if you're in Lance Lynn? You could see the game out, having a no-hitter, but you lose 1-0. It'd be quite you wonder if anything like that's ever happened before. But there's definitely a kind of spate of these this season. And as Alan alluded to, you don't want to see them diluted in the praise, because you do notice a little bit in the media, another no-hitter. And people are making little jokes or little memes, but it's a hell of an achievement for that pitcher and the catcher and the overall team to actually manage that.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good point, Dave Jr. And I always think as well, there's almost some pressure, I guess, on, as you mentioned, the catcher, the rest of the team, particularly as you get into that last inning or two. You wouldn't want to make a mistake that costs a pitcher, a really unique opportunity there as well. Yorkshire Dave, as a man who knows his baseball history, what do you make of the kind of the frequency of no-hitters? Should we just be praising excellent pitching, or could there be something more going on?
It's exciting to see it happen. There's been 6 this season, 7 if you include the 7-inning one that I think we mentioned earlier. I have heard a few discussions about why this might be happening. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I did look it up on the Baseball Almanac, no less, and since 1876, I feel that there's been 311 no-hitters. So that's over a course of 145 years since the very first one, when George Bradley of the St. Louis Brown Stockings pitched one. And then we had, as you say, Spenny Turnbull and Corey Kluber back-to-back no-hitters this week. So this century, you've had 63 already. Even last year, we had 2 in a 60-game season. So you have to, Alan will know this as being a stats man. You look at any sort of sequence of events and you will see clusters. But 6 or 7 already this season, we're just over a quarter of the way through, when the average is just over 2 a year. Something seems to be happening, and as it would suggest, that maybe there are fewer hits. On the other hand, you have conflicting arguments about there are more home runs, so you suspect actually the batters got the edge there, but there may be a connection actually that batters are going for home runs and not worrying too much about striking out as much as they used to do. I think back in the day, it used to be against a batsman would say, well, he strikes out too much. Now they don't mind as long as he's getting the occasional home run. And you've got this technique of going for the launch angle. You've also got the shift in there, which is designed to look at the stats of the hitter, where he's hitting the ball. So this is when the infield is moved from its original position to shut off the place where a particular batsman tends to hit his ground balls. So that is reducing the amount of hits in the game. So this is all contributing towards these no-hitters. And the final thing is that I've heard, they're just saying pitches are just better these days than they've ever been. So pretty much you go back 30, 40, 50 years or more, it's very unusual for a pitcher to have, 90 miles an hour fastball with some movement on it. Now pretty much every pitcher's got that in his armory. They're not pitching beyond 100 pitches unless, of course, they're going for a no-hitter. So all these aspects are creating an environment where you can get this proliferation of no-hitters. And I don't mind it myself, but those guys that are historians and looking at the game are questioning it. And this is one of the reasons why they're talking about moving the mound back or reducing the size of the mound. Mind you, they can reduce the mound as much as they like, but these pitchers are tall guys, aren't they? 6'5" is fairly normal. I know the big unit was a tall dude, wasn't he? But I think the average height of a pitcher is compensating for any reduction in the amount of mound. So
yeah. My conclusion, and I don't know as much as Dave. My conclusion was the same as his last point, that the pitchers are better. So if you look at it statistically, the first 120 years, there was like 2 a season. It now sounds like there's 3 a season. That this season's an awful lot more. I know people have mentioned the fact that last year's shorter season possibly has had an impact. But the way I look on that is people are getting better. So you often ask me about golf. The professionals today are better than they were 20 years ago. Now some of that's down to the equipment, but a lot of that is down to coaching, technique, understanding the swing. Probably a lot of it is down to power. So yeah, the batter might have more power, but he's using the same piece of equipment. But if people have found ways to pitch the ball faster, to pitch the ball with more spin, put something else on a curveball that might not have been there before, that's what they're ultimately aiming for. Are young kids also motivated to play more baseball, so it's harder to get to the big leagues because people are thinking that this isn't a game where you're going to go and get a decent pension and you're able to open a pub and make a few quid off that. This is now a game where you're earning big bucks. So it stands to reason that people who love the game will try harder and get better and better. So I'm going with the main theory that the pitchers are just better. I'm intrigued as well. It's a fascinating subject. Watching a television spectacle is generally better to see hits and runs because that's what you're sort of looking to see. If you go to, because we don't go to many games, if we went to a game, you'd want to see hits and runs. But when you watch football, you enjoy seeing great defending. You enjoy seeing great goalkeeping. You have to look at the game in its whole context. And I'm a fan of applauding the pitching. We ridiculed the Italians in 1970s and 1980s football for calling a 0-0 a perfect game. But hey, nobody's making a mistake.
Absolutely, Alan. And just for a change, I'm going to be controversial and cause a bit of a bust up here. So we reckon, do we, that pitching is better now? Is that I know Alan and Yorkshire Dave are of that mind. Dave Jr., just before I come in on that point, what's your view?
I reckon the elite are better. I think if you still look across the scorecards, you're still going to see high-scoring games. You're seeing just as many home runs, if not more at times. I haven't done as much analysis as Dave, but you wonder if maybe in the last few years there's perhaps been a lower amount of no-hitters or perfect games, and is the game just catching back up this year? If this year might not be the freak, the freak might have been the last 5 or 10 years when we haven't seen as many, because we still seem to be seeing high-scoring games, or we still see pitch counts going up quite high in the first, second and third innings, and pitchers being taken out of the game by their manager. So you wonder if it's the very elite or the best are now being shown in a better light?
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. I'll take it one step further. I would be the first to admit that pitchers now are faster. And as you say, Yorkshire Dave, a lot of them have got very hot stuff in a way that in years and decades gone past, that was more of a rarity. I don't think they're better per se. And I'm sure there are stats, and Alan will know them to prove it one way or the other. But part of me thinks pitchers were wilier back in years gone by. If you didn't have that heat, if you didn't have that speed, did you have to be cleverer with how you pitched? Did you have to find new and different ways to get your guy out? So I'd be interested in what our listeners, most importantly, think. Are Yorkshire Dave and Alan in the right? Is Dave Jr. with his kind of halfway house? Is that where you want to sit? Or are you with me and longing for the old days where crafty pitchers were using all of their skills and wiles to get the batters out? And Alan, for our listeners that want to contribute to that debate, to tell us which of the Bullpen Bros is right and who's wrong, how do they get in touch with us to do that?
We'll put a wee chat topic up on Twitter during the week, getting people's opinions on that. I think it would be really good to hear. I liked Dave Jr.'s point actually about elite, because I'll bring that back to golf again, where we're now seeing the pros hitting the ball 350, 400 yards. I mean, the top guys have added 100 yards on to their game. Bryson DeChambeau, not a big fan of Bryson's, I'm afraid to say, but he's done a lot of work just to get that power up there. But what they say is the average handicap of an amateur golfer is no different to 20, 30 years ago. So we've made all this improvement in the ball and in the equipment, but it's not helped the amateurs. But the guys at the elite, they've managed to get in there and do that. So it's a good observation. But the cream is certainly rising to the top and is a cream tastier. So let's find out your thoughts on Twitter.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Alan. And I think it's also worth mentioning just less than a week after a man who many thought was from a bygone era in the world of golf, Alan, I suspect one of your heroes, proved that veteran wiles can defeat big hitting youth in one of the golf showpiece events. Yeah,
Phil's not short of a yard or two, but he's fantastic. And I was more concerned that he's now the oldest person ever to win a major, but I still look on him as a young man. So I don't know where that places me in life, but and maybe it should reassure me that as my game is getting worse and worse, that there's hope for me. Yeah, I'm going to come back with that Phil's Kiowa Island performance this weekend, I think.
Excellent. I know you'd be a fan of young Phil, as you refer to him, Alan, so that doesn't surprise me at all.
So if it's okay, guys, I've got a couple of quick nominations for heroes and villains, or hero and villain. You might well have some yourself. Slightly unusual hero. We have talked about Spencer. We have talked about Miggy. But I wanted to give this to our new friend, Rob from Astros Baseball. Recent episode of Astros Baseball, Rob and Michelle were having a chat, and he's my hero because he did the most fantastic Scottish accent in his podcast. And I think that should become compulsory for any guests on the Highland Bullpen going forward.
Well, actually, you know what? We'll give him the highest praise possible. We'll actually refer to him as Rab going forward, which is what all good Scotsmen call people called Robert. So that's the highest accolade we can give here in the bullpen.
The villain of the week, I'm going to hold my hands up here and I'm going to take the award myself. And our fantasy baseball team were beat, which is understandable. That's going to happen. Somebody forgot to put Spencer Turnbull into our lineup. And I just think it's unforgivable. I'm working hard on forgiving myself. I've not considered an appropriate punishment yet, but it's broken my heart, Richard.
I have to say, Alan, that our show mascot, Hamish, the Highland Bull, is particularly annoyed that you'd ever drop an MLB player with Bull in his name, Alan. So that was obviously karma for you not putting him in the lineup.
And he's been snapped up. We had him once or twice. We were bringing him in and out because we probably shouldn't say it. We didn't see that he was a target for the other teams, but he's been snapped up now. So we'll still wish him well during the season, and we'll keep an eye on him. Will the other team hold their nerve and keep him?
We'll see. Well, Alan, you've stolen my thunder. I had you down as the villain of the week as well.
Oh, no. Twice.
Any other heroes or villains of the week that we've not covered either of our two Daves?
Boston brought in this guy, Danny Santana, and he's 30 years old, so he's been around. They picked him up. I can't remember who he played. He played for a couple of other teams, and he's he's quite a stocky individual. He's from the Dominican Republic, and Boston has got had some great Dom Rep players in their lineup in the past, and he hits for power, and he hit a home run in his first two games to the Red Sox, but he has speed, and he's not afraid to go for it. The other day he hit a double and he dove into second, and you've never seen a dirtier uniform in your life. He actually got called out at second place, but they took it to review, and he was awarded the base. And then he looked up, and he wasn't just dusting his jersey down; he was actually digging out bits of dirt from that got inside his jacket. And thankfully it wasn't the home jersey, the white one. It was the dark blue one. Otherwise, and they don't change them, do they, during the game? He just wore it for the rest of the game. And he's one to look out for. I think depending on how things go, he'll steal you a base, I think. So it might be one for our fantasy team, because I don't think he's being snapped up yet. Danny Santana.
We'll keep an eye out on his fortunes there. It sounds like he tried to dive under the base, let alone at the base, to be honest with you.
Just about. He just managed to keep hold of it.
And to use a good Scottish word, it sounds like his uniform was properly manky, which is a top Scottish word that we'd recommend using at every opportunity. Now, of course, that talk of uniforms leads us on nicely to, believe it or not, the follow-up to our previous trousers chat, when we spoke previously about sports and which trousers are worn, and tried to work out how many of them we could identify. Now, Alan, for the benefit of listeners that might have missed that, one of our more out-there discussions previously, we were talking, were we not, about which sports people played wearing trousers, and obviously baseball is king among them.
Yeah, I think it was our favourite listener, and apologies to every other listener, but it was our favourite listener, Archie, who asked that question. And I think the whole context of his question was, are there more athletic sports where they wear trousers? I think we immediately went to darts and golf, although there were comments from the two Daves to my left here that they're not sports. I don't know where they were getting that concept from. What is the most athletic sport you can participate in wearing trousers?
Well, Alan, for the benefit of our listeners who are unfamiliar, there's a Scottish sport that we're very proud of, but might not be known to much of the wider world, that involves the wearing of trousers for a specialist position.
Yeah, so Shinty. Shinty will be the most equivalent thing you guys would get this at is field hockey. Probably a little bit, shall we say, rougher and tumbler than field hockey. And it's a game generally off the Highlands. The hockey stick is called the Cayman, C-A-M-A-N. They bash this ball around the park. But the goalkeeper, the teams wear proper kit. We'll find some pictures. There'll be video on YouTube and what have you. The big event is the Camanachd Cup final. But the goalkeeper, for some reason, he pretty much turns up in a pair of work trousers and a sweater. He generally wears a helmet these days, because it can be a fairly dangerous sport, the pace this ball comes in at.
It ended it quite a good bit whilst Alan was in mid-flow.
And nearly ended at the best bit just before he started. You're getting it tight this week, Alan. My apologies.
He has turned up from his work in the garden on a Saturday afternoon to play Shinty. And it's the most dangerous position on the field, I would imagine. As regards athleticism compared to baseball, he's got to be a lot braver. He's got to be running out a wee bit to get the ball. He's got to be alert. He's not got that 90 feet dash that players would have, and he's not got that running to go and catch a ball. It's worth a decent shout.
Thinking back, well, not that I remember it in person, but male tennis players would have played in long trousers in Wimbledon back in the day. You know, I think in the 30s, Fred Perry, not only did they play in, you know, sort of proper trousers, but with turn-ups as well. I'm sure, you know, he probably could have gone out for the evening in the same gear, got allowed into his gentleman's club back in the old amateur days of sport. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a guy in the 70s or 80s who qualified for Wimbledon but was the lowest ranked player in the tournament. He wanted to sort of milk the moment. I can't remember his name, but I'm pretty sure he decided to dress in long trousers and in the garb of the classic 1930s and milks the moment sort of thing.
Absolutely. Alan, just thinking there, I mean, you've painted a really good picture of Shinty. I'm just trying to think if there's anything to add. Played by amateurs as well, Alan, is that correct? Is it an amateur sport?
Yeah, I would imagine so. I'd imagine they're probably expenses and a 10 or 20 quid or whatever for playing. It's very prestigious in the communities. Newton Moor, King Usey, Oban, a lot of the big Highland towns and villages. I think this might be quite similar. I talked about field hockey. Ice hockey is an interesting one because I think this is the same thing here as well. But King Usey Golf Club has the highest number of left-handed golfers in the world, or the biggest proportion. And that's because most of them play Shinty. So you effectively play Shinty as a in like a left-handed pose. So then becomes very natural to the guys who are right-handed to play golf left-handed. And I think the Canadian golfer Mike Weir was a hockey player because there was some crazy fact that Phil Mickelson and Mike Weir, both left-handed golfers, but weren't actually left-handed.
Phil Mickelson's a lefty, isn't he? Big Phil, sorry.
Big Phil.
Or young Phil Talon, as he clarified earlier on. Should point out as well that basically Shinty, like hurling, the Irish game that's not too dissimilar, basically involves lots of very tough guys hitting each other and occasionally the ball with big sticks.
Yeah. The start of a game, for those of a weak disposition, it's not the first pitch, it's not the kickoff. It's the best title ever for starting a game. It's called a throw-up. So it's like a Saturday morning in Sauchiehall Street.
Yes, it's very reminiscent of the favourite setting for bar battles between drunks in Glasgow. And it's a good sport. And Alan, just to finally round that off and delight our American listeners in particular, I suspect, could you tell us again what the name of the most prestigious competition in Shinty is?
It's the Camanachd Cup. So Camanachd is a Gaelic word. And I think, to be honest, it's the Gaelic word for Shinty. So it's the Shinty Cup because the game is governed by the Camanachd Association, which will be the Shinty Association.
Am I right in saying, I'm sure you've told me this, but the word cam is crooked, which goes to describe the Shinty stick?
Yeah, the caiman or the caman is crooked. Well, it's obviously crooked in it, and obviously that's why it is a stick to hit something with. It. Cam means crooked, and for those of you Americans interested in genealogy, I'm a Cameron. Unfortunately, that's a nice simple one of a crooked nose. I don't have a problem with that. If you're a Campbell, you've got a crooked mouth.
No, we'll not say any more about that. We're not going to get into any clan warfare on this programme. Yeah,
let's not relive Glencoe. But that was a fantastic piece there, Alan, and thanks. And I learned a lot there as well, so I'm sure our listeners around the world will have done as well. We'll move on from there to the Fantasy League, which has become the Bullpen Bros League is in danger of turning into a procession as Dave Jr.'s uncountable changes and tinkering continue to propel him further up in top spot. So congratulations to Dave Jr. for his recent dominant streak. But for the Bullpen team as a whole, against the world of podcasters, Alan, obviously we Well, you can't enjoy victory unless you've experienced defeat. So we'll bounce back from that, no doubt. But how are we shaping up in that British Podcasters League?
I think that's a very philosophical way of looking at it. We encountered our first defeat 5-4 against Big League Chew. That's not a train podcast. That is actually a baseball podcast. And that's one of my better jokes. So we were beat 5-4. Quite a lot of tight categories in there. We were always a wee bit behind the curve on that, but there were quite a few we were humped in a few, but there was a few we were quite close to. We remain in third place, although there was a change in the top table-topping birds with balls. They hammered fly ball to the moon, who were in second place, putting them down to fourth. So Angels over the pond go to second. Not to worry you guys, but I did do a quick analysis of the birds with balls because they're shooting away with us. If we had played them last week, the score would actually have been 10-0, and I won't say who for.
That's probably as one-sided as my Mariners' recent encounter with the Padres, Alan. So I'm glad we're maybe savouring that contest for a later moment. And if we just lost 5-4, Alan, if only we'd had some, I don't know, for example, some informed pitcher throwing no-hitters, that would have been terrific, wouldn't it?
I don't even. What can I say? This week's a busy week. We've got the Red Sox have got 2 games less than the other 3 teams, so I think the tactics is to focus on those 3 teams and see what we can come up with.
Excellent. And how many, for the benefits of listeners who maybe haven't heard this piece before, Alan, how many teams are in that Baseball Podcasters League?
There's 16 different podcasters in the UK league, so yeah, we're sitting in third place. I suppose with 6 wins and 1 defeat, or 5 wins, 1 draw, and 1 defeat, it's not a surprise we're fairly near the top. I think the top 6 go to the playoffs. So this week marks halfway through the regular season at 8 games. So there's a little bit of pressure on there, but I think our boys can come up to the mark.
And Dave Jr., with my schoolboy arithmetic, I reckon that means we're scoring about 780 or something like that, Alan. I think with 5 wins and 1 draw, 1 defeat out of 7 matches there. So that's pretty impressive. That would certainly see us leading the pack in the world of MLB. So Dave Jr., should we be proud of our opening stretch?
Absolutely. I'm quite gutted that you didn't give me an opportunity to further mock Alan, which feels very, doesn't feel right to me.
We'll just redo that bit, don't worry.
We'll just redo. Yeah.
You want to talk about our Interbro Fantasy League now and reference
that'd be perfect timing. No, we've had a great record so far this season. It's been really, really good. Again, I think it's really interesting the way that we've decided to do things, just picking from our 4 teams. We've had a really, really good run. There's clearly some teams out there that know what they're doing, but B, when to do it. I think we never had any dreams of winning that, but I think we're doing really well considering the way that we've limited ourselves to that. So as much fun as it is to have a laugh at Alan, he just maybe needs to put some more time in, if I'm being quite honest.
You don't want 9 a.m. texts anymore.
Yeah, and to be honest, you're doing too much of that kind of selfish sleeping thing for several hours a day. That's useful time that can be devoted to further baseball management, I reckon. Yorkshire Dave, you and Alan are very much co-coaches for the Highland Bullpen team, so I guess we can be fairly proud of our performance so far, given, as Dave Jr. rightly pointed out, we've chosen to make it tougher. We've chosen to take the hard road and restrict it to players from our 4 teams.
Yeah, not only that, is that we really, to be truthful, we didn't have any idea of how it works, did we? So, we did think that we were 16 teams. We were told that you were pitched against a different team each week, but it's not a straightforward win-lose, is it? There are 10 categories, 5 batting, 5 pitching. So you were scored on each one of those categories against the other team, and then the result is, you can't have an actual tie in certain categories, but you can win 6-4, you can draw 5-5. So over the 7 weeks we've had now, I haven't got the figures at hand, but we've won something like 36 categories. I think we're over 600 in percentage terms, and we've got a couple of ties. So we're in third place, and I think it's remarkable. Really, we've made one or two mistakes, but we've made some great. I mean, Alan, to be fair to Alan, he's made some absolutely great calls. Was it week 5 that we were behind on 2 or 3 categories, and he made some last-minute trades and got us over the line, got us an extra stolen base here and a save there. It's great fun, and it really does, as if baseball wasn't, exciting enough already. We've got our fantasy lead to follow as well. It really is good, and it's great of Jason, a good friend from Dugout Classics, to put us onto this, and he's set it all up, hasn't he? And it really is a well-run tournament.
Absolutely. And talking about Jason, and we mentioned earlier on about those kind of filthy uniform after that slide into the plate. If you're after some nicely clean, pressed and starched baseball apparel, do visit Dugout Classics. They've got fantastic gear for lots of teams and great prices. And Dave Jr., they get plenty of good stuff for the kids as well, haven't they?
They do. It's quite interesting that you've just mentioned that, Richard. I get a lovely message from Jason during the week saying that he might be able to source some White Sox related paraphernalia for the wee guy. So he's going to have a look into that for me, although the wee guy might be a bit annoyed to find out that his team has moved from LA to Chicago.
They're young, they can adapt. Don't worry, Dave Jr., don't worry. And we'll hope to have Jason back on, joining us in the Highland Bullpen in the near future as well, as a very popular guest, and well worth checking out his appearance and looking back on the past episodes of the Highland Bullpen for lots of great content. Now, one of the stats categories which obviously with Alan's Moneyball style mastery of spreadsheets and figures has helped us do well in, is the ERA. Now, I think we know ERA is a well-known phrase in baseball. Is it earned run average? Is that correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. So I think, Yorkshire Dave, you were going to talk a little bit about some of the other kind of categories and stuff like that and where they fit in.
Yeah, it is interesting. The ERA is, a real traditional measure of how a pitcher is doing, and it's a representation of the number of earned runs. So not just runs scored, but runs which count against the pitcher, and it's per 9 innings. So more often than not, a pitcher doesn't, your starting pitcher doesn't pitch a full 9 innings. So you've got to do a bit of arithmetic. So I'm not going to do this on the top of my head, but if he gives up 3 innings, and this makes no account of. So if a runner reaches base on an error, or even a pass ball, I think, or maybe not a wild pitch, and that runner gets home, it will not necessarily count against the pitcher's earned run average. But one of the other categories is WHIP, WHIP, which is, let me get this right, walks plus hits per inning pitch. So this is not per 9 innings. So this tells you nothing to do with the earned run. So this is not runs scored. This takes account of a pitcher who may walk a batter, or a guy who may get a hit and reach base through a hit, but not necessarily get home and score a run. So a good whip is basically, if you see a whip around 1.00, so that's seen as actually better than good, really excellent. So anything 1 or under. So that's a pitcher who is not allowing a walk, more than 1 walk or hit per innings pitched, is excellent. Whereas an earned run average, probably between 3 and 4. Anything under 3 is considered really top class. So, yeah, you've got to, these are the two categories which we didn't do too well on last week, did we? I don't know who our opponent had pitching for him, but at one stage, his ERA was 0, wasn't it? And he'd had, he'd gone through about 15 innings. Yeah, so he must have had, I don't know, a couple of superheroes pitching for him. But that's the way it goes. So, you've got to keep an eye on these stats, who's walking more batters, and very interesting.
It's good explanation, because I, as a relative novice, I was confused that 2 measures against how the pitcher is allowing people to score or hit are actually quite different, because you're sort of assuming that if he's allowing walks and hits, he's going to be allowing runs, but that's not necessarily the case. So it was quite fascinating. It was good explanation, and we chatted a bit about it during the week. So thank you for your
I think quite often they look at the pitcher's stats as strikeouts versus walks. So I think because if you put a man on base without the guy having to make a hit, quite often you will hear commentators say that run was scored. The run that scored was the guy that he walked to first base with nobody out. And he's the one that ends up scoring. So it's all the stories behind the stats.
When David mentioned that in the chat group during the week, I'd done a quick check on Google and just searched for a right good whip. Just watch what you do, guys. Okay, watch what you do.
Yeah, so some items aren't available at Dugout Classics.
Just one thing, so leading on a wee bit from that in the pitching category, because I know Dave and myself as co-coaches, we discussed the saves and the holds category. So something happened last night. Well, it must happen all the time, but it intrigued me. But the Mariners came good for us last night with, on the pitching side, a win and a hold. But they also had a player who has recorded a save in the game as well. So a hold is not an official MLB category. It is used by a lot of scorers. It is used in the fantasy league. But you can have 3 different pitchers in the same team accredited with a win, a hold, and a save. I just thought that was, so I mean, that from a fantasy league perspective, if you can work out guys are going to do that.
I think when we initially saw that category, didn't really know it's SV plus H, didn't we? And we didn't really know what that was. So, the save is those genuine rules for that, aren't they? They've got the closer. It doesn't necessarily have to be the closer, but the closer usually comes in. I think he's got to save opportunities where he comes in with 3 or fewer runs lead, and he's got to hold that lead and get a certain number of players out. The hold, as you say, is probably an unofficial category. I think some official scorers back in the 80s thought that certain relievers were doing a good job and not getting credited with anything, and it probably made their job more interesting as well, and they created this this category of holds. So I think if a reliever comes in, say in the 8th inning with a 2 or 3 run lead, and he gets at least 1 batter out and holds that lead for the closer to come in and get the save, then he will be credited with this hold. It's quite important for fantasy league thing to find out who are getting these holds, and it can make the difference of winning that category or not.
Absolutely, and obviously those wins or losses for all those teams will determine the final fantasy league positions within the bullpen. And just before we move on and wrap up with our look ahead to what the next 7 days holds for our teams, we should probably give Dave Jr. the opportunity for one last gloat that after making a mere 847 trades, he's marching ahead at top spot in the Bullpen Bro League.
Oh, thank you, Richard. What I would go on to mention though is we really do need a name for it. I think we might need a sponsor if we can kind of reach out to all these different sources out there. We do need a name for this particular league. But when it comes to our 4 teams, so to remind listeners, that's the White Sox, the Mariners, the Red Sox, and the Tigers. We all record the results between those 4 teams, and it's quite interesting. The Tigers, they may not be having their best season on record, but they've moved up a spot in that 4-team mini league. I can't remember who they. Did you sweep someone, Alan, last week?
Yes, we swept a team on the West Coast.
Ah, okay. Those pesky Dodgers again, huh?
It ended ERS, yes.
Richard should be quite glad that the series came to an end, because over the 3 games, the Tigers were only becoming more dominant. 4 runs, 5 runs, 6 runs. I think we know the magnificent 7 might have rolled in as times went on. But you do have the chance, Richard, when you travel to Detroit in a couple of weeks' time, there's a 3-game series there, which would be good. But the Tigers now sit at a 5-5-6 record. 1-4, lost 4. So 1-5 and lost 4. So that's been the only action just now. But the next goings on between the teams is a 4-game series in Chicago, when Detroit again make their way, not too far a distance, but a 4-game series from the 4th till the 7th of June.
Excellent. And the White Sox still atop that league, or is it the Red Sox atop that league at the moment, Dave Jr.?
The White Sox. Oh, okay. The Red Sox haven't had much action going on recently. Their last appearance was a 3-game series against the Tigers, though they did win that 1-2-1 to just put Alan's gas at a peak.
And well worth the doing. Now, of course, much as I love beating the Bullpen Bros, there's one thing I like even more, and sadly something that's not happened for me for a while, but my Mariners are taking on the Texas Rangers, so I'm looking to get some victories against the Rangers, which unfortunately for myself and my fellow football fans hasn't happened much in recent times. But so those Rangers in the Oakland A's are the guys that the Mariners are looking to try and get some wins against. Dave Jr., what's in store for the White Sox?
I just wonder if you can see the Rangers coming, Richard.
We'll have to cut this bit out. We're running along.
So over the next week, we started our week off pretty well, our bullpen week, with we welcomed the St. Louis Cardinals to Chicago, and we swept them away pretty well. Just one game, but 2 more over the next coming nights. I think I mentioned last week, but we've got 31 games over 31 days coming up. And that's another 2 games against the Cardinals, with 4 then come up against the Orioles, who are not performing too well just now, before we kind of kick the month off against Minnesota, who we seem to play a lot recently. But good to get these games under our belt. I think one thing that's coming to my attention, the more that this season plays out, last season was a real freak show when it comes to fixtures, but winning those games against your interdivision rivals are, it's almost like the proverbial 6-pointer to bring things back to Scottish football. If you can distance yourself from those other teams, it's not that the other games don't matter. It's great to pick up those wins. Putting your rivals to the sword is really quite good just now.
And tonight, for the Boston Red Sox, they're playing the Atlanta Braves. We've got a couple of games there to play tonight as we record this, and tomorrow evening, possibly some fairly tough contests there. But you've then got the Marlins after that. Yorkshire, Dave, is that an opportunity to keep the momentum going?
Well, yeah, both those teams are sort of slightly under 500, but only just. I think they're both National League teams, so it's an interleague. 2 interleague series, isn't it? So that'll be quite interesting back at Fenway, where actually, funnily enough, normally Boston are really quite strong at home, but this season that's not been the case. So we'd like to see them turning it on a little bit for the fans that will be along with for. They've got a full house in there. I think at the end of the month, they take on the Astros in a series. I think that might be down in Houston. And just hearing you talk about Texas reminded me about when we spoke to Rob and we were asking him about the rivalry with the Texas, and both him and Michelle like to refer to them as the Arlington Rangers. And they've had a series quite recently, which I've seen described as either the Lone Star series, reflection of the Texas Lone Star State, or the Silver Boot State. We need to look into that a bit further. Not the Silver Bullet, but the Silver Boot series.
As a youngster growing up in Scotland back in the day, back in the 80s, America held a lot of glamour, but there was something in particular about Texas. That obviously we're talking about Houston here, but Dallas was the must-watch TV show. Yeah. Used to get monster ratings. Always thought the Dallas Cowboys used to be the coolest, biggest football team and stuff like that. So definitely, if you like great podcasts and you like the great state of Texas, then definitely tune into Rob and Michelle. It's a great listen. And Alan, talking about great listens, I'll introduce Alan again. Alan, the Detroit Tigers, just to wrap up for the week. You mentioned earlier on you've got a fairly challenging one coming up. You are unfortunate just to get edged out by the Indians in the first game of that series, 6-5, which I wonder if the next ones tonight and tomorrow might be just as close. And then you've got the Yankees. So where are you looking to finish up 7 days from now? How many wins would you hope to get under the belt?
Pessimistically, I think if the Tigers get 3 wins out of 7, they've got to be reasonably content with that. The Indians, watching more and more baseball, and a lot of the big name players, but there's one guy in the Indians, I've sort of seen him for a couple of years now, this guy, Jose Ramirez. I think he's the third baseman, and to use one of Yorkshire Dave's descriptions earlier, he's a slightly stocky chap, as some of these baseball players tend to be, but he seems to be one of those guys. It's like the footballer who always scores against your team. He probably scores against every other team as well, but he's always there against the Tigers, and he's one of those guys that I get frustrated when I see him coming there. So the Tigers have been going well, so yeah, we'll get back on track after last night. The Yankees, I think the Yankees have come back into a bit of form recently. They were struggling a wee bit. I think it's about time we cut them back to the level they should be at. So perhaps if we get swept by the Indians, then clearly my prediction is that we'll then be sweeping the Yankees.
Well, we'll look to see if you're proven correct 7 days from now, Alan. And certainly I'm also glad to give a shout out to all the stocky guys in baseball, as somewhat of a stocky junkie monkey myself. Dave Jr., just before we wrap up, do you have any last words for the listeners?
I'm just wondering how your own Mariners are faring this week, Richard. What's in store with you guys? Yeah,
but the Oakland A's will be a real tough test. And as I say, we appear recently to, certainly against the Padres in particular, giving up just a shed load of runs. So hopefully they're not too shell-shocked, having shipped 31 runs to the Padres over 10 games. But we're a good start. We took care of the A's in the first game of the series. So if we could pick up at least one of the remaining 2, we've got a series win in store. And as I say, it's my last chance of the year to try and see a victory over the Rangers. So I'm hoping that the Texas version will be vanquished.
When you mentioned the Padres, that National League West, from just having a quick look there, that looks a hell of a division. I know that Dave's team are involved in a hell of a scrap going on there, but San Diego Padres, the LA Dodgers, reigning world champs, the San Francisco Giants, who are outstanding. I do feel sorry. Colorado and Arizona seem to be the kind of whipping boys, and given that you play your inter-league rivals more often than other teams, that must be really pretty tough to be fans of those teams, because the other ones, if you excuse the pun regarding San Francisco, they're giants. They're absolutely 3 giant teams And it must be quite hard just to spend the whole season. At this point, they're nowhere near the playoffs. They're not going to get there. What do you do with the rest of your season? Because there's a lot of games left and there's no cups to play for. There's no, it's World Series or bust.
I think fans of those teams would just dodge the question.
On that note, we'll bring a merciful end to this latest episode of the Highland Bullpen Baseball Podcast. Remember getting to, after starting the show boasting of the prime steak, we've ended up with a lot of mince there. However, if you want to get some more high quality material, do check out our previous podcasts, our previous episodes. Get in touch via social media. Are pictures better today than they've ever been? Does faster equal better? Or was smarter the way back in the day? So get in touch, let us know. But until next time, have a great week. Enjoy your baseball, and we'll see you again in the Highland Bullpen.